Hello and welcome to season 2 of our podcast. This is effing hard. If you have not, if you have not listened to or watched this podcast before, then you should know that this is a podcast that we launched early in 2025 with Martin Sutton, and we wanted to interview as many people as we could who have been on the journey of trying to grow a business. Predominantly our world is in tech, but not all of the people that we will speak to will be in tech, because actually what we've realized over many conversations and speaking to many people who've been on this journey is that a lot of the challenges and problems that people face are not specific to one industry. They are completely cross-sector, cross-industry issues. And what we want to do is be able to help people who are on that journey, or give people who have already been on that journey, who are maybe thinking about going on that journey again, some useful insight and some knowledge that may be able to help them, and not just paint this picture that growing a business is just this wonderful journey where everything goes to plan and it's all sunshine and rainbows, because it definitely is not. Today, I am joined by Caspar Rose. Caspar is a GM at a business called Calo. I will let him tell you more about his background in a minute, but all you need to know is that Caspar and I have known each other for a long time now, I think, probably 7 or 8 years. I probably should have double checked that specific number before we jumped on. It might be nearer 10, through a business called Fresh Fitness Food, which is all linked to this conversation. But yeah, we've known each other ever since. We've done some work with him over the years. And like I say, it's been a really interesting journey. I will talk no longer. Caspar, thank you for joining me. And maybe to start with, you'd like to give us a bit of background on you and just where you're at today. And then we can dive a bit more into the backstory of how you got there.
Thanks so much for having me on, Lloyd. I appreciate it. And yeah, I think it's been 10 years. Lloyd was our recruiter at Fresh Fitness Food for a really long time. One of my favorite stories was I'd never had a recruiter before, but I'd heard that recruiters always buy you dinner when they take you out. So this new kind of sharp, good-looking lad called Lloyd said, "Hey, let me take you out for dinner. I'm your recruiter." And we just did a hire. And I said, "Great, I've never been to Goodman's Steakhouse before, so let's go there." And he was like, "Sure." And I got there early, and I was there with Jared, and we were running Fresh Fitness Food together. And we called the waiter over, and I said, "Listen, when this third guy turns up, can you bring over like your best bottle of Dom Perignon and pretend to start unwrapping it in front of it and say, 'This is the bottle you want'?" And he comes over with the bottle and starts pretending, and Lloyd's face just goes white, and he's like, "Really? Really?" We were like, "Yeah, let's go. We made our first hire." And then the
I
guy
never knew this, by the way.
and walks off, and we were just cracking up. And Lloyd was like, "Geez, guys, thanks so much." But you did buy us steaks, and it was very generous of you. But yeah, had a good laugh. And back then, I was running Fresh Fitness Food. Prior to that, I'm originally from Australia. I grew up in a small town called Byron Bay, which is paradise. I went immediately from high school, originally into washing dishes full time, and then into my culinary, like cookery apprenticeship or commercial cookery apprenticeship, and then went into kind of high-end Michelin star restaurants. I worked at a place that was number 64 on the top 100 San Pellegrino list, and then a bunch of other fancy places after that. Worked with some celebrity chefs like Matt Moran, and then came to the UK and worked with Gordon Ramsay here, became one of his sous chefs at Maze. And yeah, spent some tough years in kitchens. Came out of that, was living with Jared, the chap I just mentioned, who's been quite like figurative for me in my career and life. It was a complete circumstance moving in with him. I was living in a hostel because I couldn't yet afford to move into an apartment. I couldn't yet afford the deposit. So I was working at the hostel while I was working for Gordon, and then got my first paycheck, went down the road to Westbourne Park to the first apartment that I'd applied for. And there's Jared at the door. And there was like refurb council estate. And I ended up living with him for a couple of years. And in that apartment, Fresh Fitness Food got started, and we were making sort of personalized meals using really complicated Excel files and lots of hard work. And it was a pretty messy start. I had zero business experience going from a chef going into that. And then Jared left in 2016. We'd already met Lloyd, but before then. And then I carried on as CEO, but with a really incredible executive team, many of whom are still with me today at the new business we're at. And that's going back, I guess, like 12 years now since we originally got going. And then grew that business, ended up creating a collective of brands, of health food brands. I've always just been really passionate about food, really passionate about my community, really passionate about building great teams, and really passionate about fitness. So it's always been at the intersection of the things that I love. And so I've always wanted to just keep doing exactly what we're doing, but try to do it at the greatest scale possible to have the most impact possible. And that group of brands had Fresh Fitness Food in it, but also had Detox Kitchen in it, which entered the group around 2022. And I was running both brands. And then we sold those brands to Calo earlier this year. And we have since been focused on just growing Calo, which is a new entrant into the UK. And yeah, now I'm general manager, been demoted from CEO to general manager, but it's in many ways a promotion, as Calo is Series B funded. We just closed £50 million. It's a hyperscaler across the globe. We're trying to do the same in the UK and repeat its success that it's had in other countries. And yeah, it's similar thing, same mission, personalized nutrition, making healthy easy. And that takes you to where I am today.
Love it. Thank you. I didn't know that story about Goodman. And I'm probably going to edit this because I don't want every client thinking that I take them to Goodman, because I definitely don't. But I probably should do that more. Although I will say this to flip that story. You were the first client that I'd ever worked with where I went to go and meet with you and Jared. I think it was at the IOD when we originally discussed working together, and you took me for lunch when we talked about the role, and I was like, "This is very."
What we're doing. We were like,
"This is completely unorthodox. I've never ever had a prospect client." So then, when you said, "Oh yeah," and I thought, "Yeah, I've got to take these guys for something good." So Goodman Steaks it was.
Two pro tips then for anyone out there. One, don't pay for your recruiter's lunch, and two, I think the reason we had IOD memberships, instituted directors, which typical demographic of the IOD is plus 65 years old and wears an Hermes tie and a 40-year-old suit. But they have the cheapest members club membership in town. And they have an entrepreneurs one, which is I think about £350 for the year. And you can bring up to 7 guests. So that was our office for a very long time because we didn't have a real office. And although when we got a real office, the real office was shit and had basically had no windows. It was like a dry store cupboard with like desks in it. And we've since been accused of tricking people by hiring them at the Institute of Directors on Pall Mall and then showing them the office after the interview process. Those hires are still with us today, so it went okay in the end. But yeah, that was why we would always meet people there. It was right in town and very cheap. So get yourself down there.
It's a good hack. It's a great hack. Office space in London is just so ridiculously expensive. So especially for early stage businesses, even a WeWork is not cheap really if you're bootstrapping it. And going back to early on, I guess the obvious connection for me, and I remember when I met with you and even then talking about scaling a business and the work rate and everything else that's involved with that, is you'd already come out of environments which anyone who has any interest in catering will know that, especially at the top end of that world, the requirement and work ethic needed is, I would say, on a par with the commitment level needed to grow and scale a business. So did you find that the expectation of work needed to scale FFF easier because of the background that you'd had in catering?
Yeah, I think the way to think about it is, I mean, first of all, I never ever stopped to look at the clock once I got into an office job. I just didn't care because it was vastly easier and less time than working in a kitchen. At Gordon Ramsay, like the job right before, which was very similar to the prior jobs, I'd start about 7:30 in the morning. I'd finish about anywhere between midnight and 1 a.m. And I'd do that 5 days a week. My first day off, I'd sleep till 3 in the afternoon. My second day off, I'd do laundry, line everything up perfectly. It had to be super organized so that you had the most efficient sleep cycle possible for the following 5 days. And then I'd disappear again and go into it. And I think that kind of like military discipline that I got around that, about waking up early, about being on time, and about working long hours, made an office job just feel like super easy, to be honest with you. And that was part of what I liked. And also you got to sit down, which was amazing. But I think that the thing that might resonate with people and that is important to note and still a thing I struggle with today, even though I try to prioritize it, is the difference is that you might work the most horrific shift ever for 15, 16 hours in a kitchen, and someone might throw a plate at you and there's a lot of shouting potentially and a few things go wrong. But at the end of the day, you walk out the door and you walk in the next day and it's like yesterday never happened. And everybody shakes hands and gets on with the day. And then you push and then you go. And I never, ever thought about work when I wasn't at work. And I think the difference for an office-based job when you've got email and Slack and all of these things on your phone is you have this kind of like constant bandwidth drain 24/7. And that can like build up in different kinds of ways and often makes you like lower execution within the given hours. So it's a different kind of strain, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I think as you remember, I've got family here in catering, so I get to see that, and yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Going back, or actually maybe let's look at the journey that you've been on. There would have been lots of different people who've influenced where you've got to today. Is there any one in particular, or one or two people that you feel have had a particularly big impact on now and where you are now? And if so, who and why?
Yeah, I want to give you three because I think they're so sorry to break the rules, but I'll do them quickly. The first one, which
That's fine.
should never be underestimated, is like my partner, Pippa. She's been incredibly supportive and created like a really amazing base, both as sometimes my therapist, advisor, and at other times just like somebody who could pick up on other things that we're doing in our lives, which allows me to do what I do. And I think that you can't underestimate the how much your productivity can increase when you have it's not the reason you have a partner or that you're with somebody, but I think that's huge credit to her for that. And I'd say it's probably the most impactful. I'd say the person who gave me the shot and that I owe a lot to is Jared. I'd never had a work email address before I met him. And he was teaching me about the importance of grammar and detail and customer and even finance and all of those sorts of things, and really gave me a shot, which in retrospect is probably quite crazy. And then third is a guy who's both been my mentor and an investor, a guy called Vincent. And he, I'd say just to make this acute, he's been incredibly good at saying to me continuously over time, of all the things you're working on or all of your aspirations or whatever you're doing, please define which of them have the ability to have the biggest impact. What's the highest probability thing you could do to have the biggest impact? And then I'd give the answer, and then he'd say, why aren't you putting everything you've got into that? And I think like the biggest any entrepreneur has is distraction. It's so easy to think I'm talented or I have a team or I have resources or I'm networking and I'm meeting people or whatever, and to get excited and to do other things. But everybody knows that if you're like good at squats, you can do more squats and you can lift more weight. And so you should keep doing squats. And I think like that's been really impactful for me. So I'd say those are the three.
I think I'm just thinking about squats and doing squats, but it's the distraction piece is something that to a person everybody struggles with at different points, and it's like sometimes I certainly feel like sometimes I'm really on top of it, and it's not something. I think consistency is the key with everything, but trying to be consistently not distracted I find incredibly hard. Have you I'm not going to say if you cracked it, but what things do you do to ensure that you are not distracted?
It's really hard. I often carry a random little thing. If no one's on camera right now, they're not seeing, but this is a stone from my favorite beach in the world. And I often carry that and find it really helpful to have a fidget spinner or a random object that makes you feel good when you think about it or something like that. That probably wasn't the answer you were expecting, but I'll carry something like this in my pocket almost at all times. And I find that it's almost stopping my hands from going and doing something else or looking something else up, and allows you to be really in the moment, whether you're on a Teams call or whether you're reading a document or doing something else. But I think that one of the worst cycles we get into is that thing I call checking, which is like checking Slack, checking email, checking the project tracker, and then just going around in some highly unproductive circle without actually doing any of the doing. So yeah, pro tip for me is carry something that makes you feel good in your pocket. I think outside of that, you've got things like time blocking and so on and so forth. I think when it comes to distraction, honestly, I think having willpower or even discipline is very difficult. I think those things fade over time, or you can even talk yourself out of them occasionally. I think the best thing around discipline, around removing distraction, is to have things that ensure that you work on the right thing, or real tangibles, or real principles that you will tack back to and that force you to do that. We can run through some examples if you want, but I think, yeah, that would be the most important thing. You've got to have really proper structure
Yeah.
around the way you work.
The stone thing I love. Where's the beach, by the way?
It's in Greece. It's actually called Wee Beach because I always stop to wee at it when I'm on this. Like you get off and you can wee because it's like halfway around the Paxos Island, and we often get a boat and go around the island. We go every August in Paxos in Greece, and about halfway around the first part of the trip, you can get off and go and wee up the beach. I don't know what it's really called, but to me it's called Wee Beach.
It's interesting though, because what you've got is just I think it feels like it's just like it interrupts the pattern. So whatever the pattern is of the thing that you're doing, it's a pattern interrupt, right? So you have the stone in your hand, and suddenly whatever you're doing, that takes you back into
Correct.
being present.
Yeah. There's some science around it. You can look it up. It's
No, I like it.
Yeah,
I like it. Well, the journey that you and Jared went on with FFF, and I think to get to a point where you are today with Calo, the brands being acquired, no doubt. And I worked with you, saw you guys bootstrapping this really all the way through, like a hard business to grow. And obviously, the topic of the podcast is really about the challenges and the pains, the hardships that you might go through. And I know there'll be loads and loads of moments. But for you, looking back on it, was there a moment a period where you were like, that was the hardest moment?
Yeah, I think hard or difficult, or however we want to phrase it, is like a relative term, right? And the hardest moment is also relative to the times before that you had before it. So my hardest moment may yet still be to come. But I think definitely in the early days there were these like really difficult moments around money and cash flow and how we would make it, and those things were really stressful, even though the numbers back then were very small. And I think a lot of those challenges came from just naivety about finances or how to run a business and things like that. And so I'd say cash flow probably super hard to begin with. Running multiple brands and the challenges that came with that was incredibly difficult. Going 2023, 2024, we had some really difficult moments. I think for anyone who can run multiple brands, I take my hat off to you. I think splitting your bandwidth and your attention between those things is something that I'm probably not great at. I'm more of one logo on the shirt and just go in every day and grind on that one thing. It maybe tacks back to the distraction point. But yeah, I mean, those challenges have been really tough. We were touched on this before, but 2024, I went so deep into some stressful moments. I got like scalp paralysis for the first time. My body actually physically reacted to what I was going through, and waking up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat and thinking my business is going to fail and we aren't going to be able to pay people. And that came from like seeing inflation in costs, and revenue wasn't growing at the rate we wanted it to go to. So there's no one specific thing, but it would just, the business wasn't in the place we wanted it to be in. And my body reacted to it, and I'd never experienced anything like that before. And yeah, your body responds in 3 ways to stress. It's scalp, it's your gut, or it's your skin. And for me, I had some gut health issues as well, but that's been pretty good, to be honest, probably because of my diet. Calo 25 for 25% off, high fiber, great food, helps with your stress. But yeah, that was interesting, and interesting how the body reacts to it.
We talked about this, I know, before. It's a conversation. In fact, of all the clients and people I've worked with, I think naturally, because of the business that you're in, it becomes a common conversation. And I'm somebody who, I think, as much as I can, I think I look after myself, certainly compared to most people, in terms of trying to get good exercise, nutrition, etc., etc. But my personal experience of going through stressful periods, certainly when we've discussed it previously, was COVID. And I can only look back on it now and know that I had real digestive and just gut issues for a while, which came from nowhere and are pretty much gone now. But like some of the stuff that I realized that worked for me was, up until that point, I don't think anything's really changed drastically with my nutrition, by the way. Like I've tried to be a bit more purposeful with it now. Yeah, eat some fermented foods, all those kind of things. A lot of dairy I take out seems to help me. But one of the things that really stood out, and I know you've had the same experience, was exercise. And I was always somebody who I used to love to just thrash myself, basically. Like Ginny, my wife, just thought I was an absolute nutter because if I didn't come out finish a gym session or CrossFit session hanging, like I needed to feel like I'd been beaten up. And I actually used to really thrive in that kind of like slight darkness of getting yourself into a bit of a hole. And it worked for me for a long time. I felt invigorated by it. And yet in the last so post COVID and then the last couple of years, I've explored that a bit more. And I generally somebody who likes to exercise in the morning. But what I've realized is if I do something too high intensity in the morning, I can feel it in my stomach. Like it doesn't feel quite right. Whereas if I do something, the same exercises, but maybe with a bit more break in between them, less of a hit session, more of a kind of structured weight session, let's say, or some cardio, but not again thrash myself, I get the same output. Yeah,
Mm.
the end result is the same, but but I feel much better for it, and actually that then carries on into my work life and my performance. And I think you and I have spoken about it before, but you've had exactly the same in terms of looking
Yeah.
at. And one of the questions I'd have to you would be in those periods. I've just talked about maybe how I've adjusted there, but stress is there, right? And it's just because you've been acquired, and we'll come on to talking about the great things of that. But nonetheless, when you're in a position of responsibility growing a brand, there will always be stress. How do you manage it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I had a similar realization maybe 5 months ago around, I think, acknowledging, and I would encourage anybody else to do this, but I think you need to acknowledge that your fitness and your exercise is a form of stress. You are stressing, the muscle then responds and grows or becomes stronger. You are putting your body under stress or strain, whether that's cardiovascular or any form of training, really. And I think I was maybe punching a 10-hour day, relatively high stress through that whole period, and then going and absolutely killing myself for an hour. I used to really love, I was teaching as a side hobby, I was teaching spin classes at the performance studio. And I love going in there myself and sitting on a bike for 45 minutes at 300 watts and walking out, and you're in just this, you've just shattered. And then go out and try to have a social life and go and have wine with my friends and get to bed at 11:30, and then wake up the next morning at 6 a.m. and go and do it again. And I used to get sick quite often. My body would be puffy, or it wouldn't respond that well. I think it's like you get these kind of early symptoms of not putting on muscle at the rate that you'd really want to, even though you think your diet's pretty strong. And I think once you start acknowledging that it's not about punching a central nervous system in the face every time you go to the gym, and about regulating your energy through the week, my body's responded really well. Both my like mental resilience has responded really well from it as well. And so you can't do everything, and your body will respond better when you actually try to balance and maintain those two things. With that said, fitness has been an absolutely critical pillar to managing stress in a job. I think I've gone through some things that, again, everything's relative, but I've gone through some pretty heavy things at work. And I would say that the things that stress is something that kind of creeps up on you. It's not a walk out the door and get punched in the face moment. It's a thing where something happens, you put a fire out, the next day something else happens, you then hear some bad news and you have to think about how am I going to manage that in the future. You then set yourself a really ambitious target on something else, and then you start having to push towards that. You then have a staff member walks up with some personal problem that is also added to your plate. You maybe have something else going on with your family, and these things start to compound slowly. And anybody listening to this, just anybody, can probably resonate with that. But one day you get out of bed and you have a nervous breakdown or scalp paralysis or gut health issues, or you get ill really quickly, or any of these other kind of symptoms that can come, or worse. And what I've discovered is that you have to develop structures that stop it sneaking up on you. So you have to say, I'm not stressed today, but I'm going to go to the gym today. Not I'm really feeling overwhelmed and sick, and now I'm going to start doing that. It's about structures that maintain your level, your equilibrium when it comes to it. And things for me that were absolute game changers, again, going back to like physical, tangible things to manage stress, were ensuring I trained, no phone in the bedroom ever. everybody hearing this will know that's a good idea, and almost no people will do it.
So true.
It's like super dumb. But like the way you do it before you say, if right now anybody's thinking, oh, but I use it for my alarm. Alarms cost like £3.50 on Amazon and come the next day. So that's not a real excuse. And the main determinant to do it again is physical structures. You take your phone charger out of your room and you put it in your living room. And so when you go to bed, even if it's with your phone, you go, oh shit. And then you get up and you go to your living room and you put it on charge. And then you go back and then you're sat there twiddling your thumbs and you think, what should I do? And then you read a book or something. And then that helps you go to sleep. And in the morning, rather than reaching for your phone and then being on it and then being sat in bed for an extra half an hour, you've got nothing to do. So you just get up and it immediately adds to the productivity of your day. Like the single biggest thing I think you can do to move the needle on your productivity, mental health would be to put your phone charger outside your bedroom and get yourself an alarm, like a Lumi alarm if you want to be fancy, or an Amazon Basics if you can't, if just whatever. And that's been like instrumental to me. So physical constraints around things like that. We've also got really strict rules at Calo around no Slack on your staff phone, not like on your personal phone, no email on your personal phone. If you like contact me when you're on holidays, you'll get back and you might get a written warning on your desk. That's because like we understand that those constraints are important for maximum productivity during the day. We also prioritize things like health and fitness. If you do 50 workouts in a quarter at Calo, you get a cash bonus. That's 4 a week. 2 per week can be a walk. We get subsidized class pass. We get you a gym membership, like all those things, because we know that it's net positive to your productivity, which makes your salary higher leverage for the work that you do. If you are 5% better at your job because you're doing these other things and you're not ruining that bandwidth outside of hours, when you come back to work, you can be higher productivity. The single lowest ROI thing anyone on my team does is check Slack before they go to bed. No one has ever created value checking Slack before they go to bed and reading something that is like nonsense or could be read the next morning in a better productive environment, or when they can actually respond. So again, physical constraints, not having those things on the phone is really important. I could talk about that a lot, something I'm very passionate about.
I know.
I'm passionate about it because I'm passionate about being productive, and I want my company to thrive. And so I think there are very good reasons to motivate you to put those constraints in place.
Look, we're completely aligned on that. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, let's say. Like, not everyone has the same ethos, and obviously each their own. But just personally, I just know that if I do most of the right things, then I feel good. And if I feel good, then I'm more productive. And if I'm more productive, then that makes me feel good. And then it becomes this kind of loop of, and equally, if I stop doing those things, then it all goes the other way as well. So it's actually fairly simple for me.
If you are an ambitious person who is going to set yourself ambitious goals, the job is almost never the problem, right? Like, you are the problem. You are putting yourself in a high strain position, and you will probably continue to do that at the next job or the next thing you do. The only variable is how light the load feels. And that load feels demonstrably lighter if you put in place other things in your life to make you stronger to carry it.
Agreed. Now, most people that I've spoken to so far on this podcast have not got to being acquired, exited, etc. And there is obviously a change when that happens. We've talked about some of the hard parts of growing, but tell me, since being acquired by Calo, what do you think, for you personally, what's the best thing you've experienced so far? What's the best part of it?
Look, like, my life's mission is to make my community healthier. And I think that at Calo, we have the ability to do that at a far greater scale than we did at FFF. And I think that comes with far more resources. I think we raised about £1 million of equity financing at Fresh Fitness Food, and Calo's at around £85 million. So there is, with that comes like a really sophisticated team. A huge motivation for me of doing the deal was that Fresh Fitness Food was my first office job. So really, I've only been able to learn from courses and mentors and other people that we've hired within the business. Now, actually, one of the upsides of having a boss and having a manager and all of these sorts of things is I have a world-class team of people that are coaching me, that I am asking questions to, that are challenging me a lot. But I think with any challenge comes growth. And I think that was a really important part for me, because the most likely scenario is that I don't do this job forever, just realistically. You probably won't do your job forever. And this is about what is it setting me up for in 5, 10, 20 years for now. So I think learning and leveling myself up has been a really important part of this. It was something I acknowledged before going into it. Yeah, I'd say they're probably the biggest things since doing it.
What's it like, though, going from being the top person in a much smaller business to being not the top 10 and actually having to report up? Because there are obvious benefits, right, to working, like you say. And a lot of founders I talk to will, as they're scaling and growing their business, especially when it's on a low budget, you're hiring people, a lot of people on potential, and actually it's really hard sometimes to bring in really experienced professionals who are at your same level. So it can sometimes feel quite lonely for founders when they're not working around people who are the level above them, actually. Whereas you're now in that situation of one last year, you weren't there. This year, you're now working with people who you're reporting up. You've got a manager you've got to report to, but also you've got people around you who probably know more, are more experienced, are better at things than you, which you never had a year ago. So how's that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Definitely comes with its challenges. You learn this new term called stakeholder management, which I'd never heard of before. And I think maybe like the two downsides I want to be really upfront with. I'd probably say decision making can often be slower. There's a lot more stakeholders involved. There's a higher bar on how you're building out data or making the case for an action that you want to do. You also have to try to get resources from other areas of the business that might have those resources could have higher ROI if they're deployed in another region or on something else. And so trying to drag those resources towards what you want to do often just requires a lot of time. So there's time on decision making. I'd say there's often accountability as well. When you're in a really small business, it's just like this one person, and anything that happens in the UK is on me, anything. But across the broader business, you might be working on a multifaceted project. I think the trick is really to try to have the whole business pulling together in the same direction. And we've got one easy banner to fly under, which is make healthy easy. And then within that, because it's a sophisticated business, we have OKRs and KPIs and all of those kinds of things, which I think are OKRs beneficial when you're 0 to 3 million. Probably not that much. You've probably got one OKR, which is grow, survive, and then 5 to 10 million, maybe a couple are interesting, but you've got to be careful not to have people think that's the only priority. You've got multiple priorities, but then OKRs at this level of scale, particularly down at a department level, are great. And we've got a killer chief of staff called John. I mentioned this because we just had an OKR meeting today. Somebody there to actually manage them and keep people on track turns those things into really less administrative effort for you and more actually allowing the teams to focus on the right things. So I'd say those are the kind of two challenges going into it, though. The adjustment, like you say, has been you have to develop relationships in a different way as well. Developing a relationship with my manager, developing a relationship with the other senior stakeholders, aligning on what each person's priorities are. There's just a lot more work that goes into those kinds of things that you never had to think of before. But yeah, it's a really interesting process. I think for anyone who's thinking about selling their business and going into it, it's the kind of process where sometimes you might not have a choice. Sometimes you might not have that much time in the process and you can't take people out to dinner and work those things through. And so what it comes back to is where do you align on values? And that term, as much as it's maybe overused in different corporate spaces, is really what it comes down to at the end of the day. If you have similar values and you're operating under the same set of values and you had them before you joined that business, it makes it easier to align on decisions and vision and stuff like that.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. I think in all honesty, if it were me now and we went through that process, I would find it really hard actually to, having done this now for 10 years and not had to report up to somebody. Although I have a Ned James who I now I'm in the habit of, and it's a fairly recent thing, of just sending him a weekly report of where we're at. And actually, it's quite refreshing to have just some accountability to some, because I've not had that. And I know that the vast majority of companies, especially in tech, will be some kind of investor led. So you're going to have investors. There's going to be that, maybe there's a board of directors, etc. You will have that, but I actually don't have that, and so I would find it really hard actually to go into a business where I then had to report up to somebody. That cultivating that relationship up. I think I'm very good at cultivating relationships sideways and down, but up, I actually don't know.
It's really tricky, honestly. Like, I don't think I've done a perfect job of it at all. Like, communication is really key. That's an area that's like, it takes, I think, like, you think it's easy at the start, and then you realize that you actually have to really develop that, and you have to really deeply understand the best ways to communicate and manage up and things like that. And that's been a real transition for me. And I think you probably think it's going to be easier than it is at the beginning, and that probably does you a disservice. And so advice, if anyone goes through it, is it's not as easy as you think, and put the work in up front to make it easier later on. I'll tell you an upside though. If you are in a small business today and you are a founder or a leader, one of the ways to know you're a founder or leader in one of those small businesses is you rarely get compliments. No one ever tells a 5 million, 10 million turnover business leader, good job. Because you're the boss and he's probably getting paid the most, so screw him, and we're going to talk to our juniors about what a good job they're doing. When you go into a big business with a lot of senior stakeholders, the feedback loop is there. They'll say great job or they say shit job, but the feedback loop is there. And so that can actually be quite nice to have a bit of affirmation on the direction you're going.
Yeah, I get that. I like everyone. Yeah, I can see that. I think everyone needs that as well, don't they? So it's nice to be told. It's hard to be told you're doing a shit job, but it's nice to be told you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
A couple of things I'd like to ask you before we wrap things up. One is, I know that you like, for me, it's a very recent thing, but I just decided to get rid of my social media apart from LinkedIn, which is just work, and it is work and social. Primarily, it's for work. And I know you've done something similar, but I also know that you are somebody, historically anyway, we've always talked around podcasts or news or books or whatever it might be, and most people I speak to in your kind of position are either avid readers or consumers of content. What do you do nowadays? What kind of stuff do you read? What do you consume, and why?
Yeah, my podcast list is probably pretty similar to a lot of other people. A bit of politics, bit of the old rest is politics chaps, and All In podcast, a couple of other ones. I'm pretty interested in AI. The Andreessen Horowitz A16Z podcast is great.
Mm-hmm.
Wall Street Journal for news and things like that. I'd say pretty bulk standard through that. On the reading side, though, something I've found myself recommending to executives, and I'll say here, is I have found it incredible for my work life to stop reading business books in the evening. So I'm on at the moment for reading about a book every 2 weeks. And I've removed reading all like business self-help books in the evening. And it's about switching off and doing something else that I find like interesting or fascinating or escapism or world building. So at the moment I'm reading like what they call space opera. So like books like June is space opera. So huge world building, sci-fi, futuristic, slightly philosophical books. And
2 weeks though.
Sorry?
Every 2 weeks?
Yeah. And they're big books.
How?
So my reading time's pretty strong. I'm probably reading for 90 minutes a night, maybe an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if I go to bed at 9:30, 10, and then I get up early and no phone in the bedroom.
So do you read, I'm getting into the detail here, but do you read when you're in bed, or because here's my thing, right? My realization of reading. So I find that if I do that just before I go to sleep, personally, I struggle to retain as much information because I'm tired.
Yeah, but what a wonderful thing to fall asleep while you're reading. Like that's my favorite way to fall asleep. My deep sleep stats go up on my Whoop, everything else. What a wonderful thing. It's win-win, right? If you read 3 pages and fall asleep, you have a great sleep. If you read for an hour, you've read for an hour, it's escapism, your vocab improves, maybe different ways of thinking about things. I've found that often people that read a lot of fiction or fantasy often have pretty clear ideas about the world and what is wrong or right or morality. I think there are a lot of like soft skills you can develop from that kind of reading. Whatever it is you're reading, just don't make it business stuff. Read it before you go to bed. Stop thinking about work. Switch off. And if it makes you fall asleep every time, then great.
Yeah, fair. I mean, look, I can't. I think I've gone past. I think I too have gone past the stage of reading just too many business kind of self-help books, and actually, I just like to read stuff that just genuinely interests me.
Yeah.
No more complicated than that. Just read because I enjoy reading. Last question before we wrap things up. We've talked a lot about where we've been and what you've done, and quite a bit actually around kind of what's going on today at Calo. But if you fast forward over the next, let's say, just over the next 12 months, like what are you personally or business wise seeing as like the biggest challenge that you're gonna face?
God, the whole thing's about challenges and difficulties, isn't it? So it's
Yeah. This is it. Yeah. What's hard? What's
this is
real
what's
hard?
hard, right?
There's nothing nice about this. There's nothing nice about this.
Brutal. Look, like we want to make healthy easy, and that's not easy. Right? The 5 biggest food companies in the world, as my boss always talks about, like none of them are healthy. And there's probably a reason for that. It's expensive. It can be less convenient depending on the format. There's tons of limitations. We don't use any ultra-processed ingredients in our food. The shelf life is lower. Calo delivers daily to customers. You can get a delivery any day of the week, Monday through Friday, anywhere in the UK. 1 working day's notice and you've got a delivery. We personalize the food to the individual. The business model is very hard, and that's what makes it unique. That's what makes it stand out from everybody else in the market. And we're trying to also do that at a price that's accessible. It's not a cheap product by any means, but again, that makes margins really hard. So there's a reason no one's at the top of the food chain at the moment and is healthy, and we're trying to like solve for that reason. And I think that's really hard. We want to grow really fast. So it is a bulk standard answer for you, Lloyd, the same as for most other people running a business. Is the challenge in front of them is how do we grow and how do we grow faster? And so that I think is the biggest challenge in front of us today. We have no lack of resources. We have no lack of potential customers. They exist out there. We need to connect with them and we need to deliver them a product that they enjoy and then they stick with it. That's the focus at the moment. And I think we have a right to compete, though, in this market. Collectively, between us and our competitors, there's about 200 million of revenue out there, and that's before we even open up the market. That's just a couple of competitors glommed together. That's before we talk about new products. We're launching something into the space around low FODMAP diet. We're launching a premium meals range if you want fillet steak delivered to your door. That's coming out shortly in the next couple of weeks as well. So there's a lot of new product releases coming. We're going to try get product market fit with a broader audience. But it's exciting. It's all under the same banner, making healthy easy.
Love it. Love it. Look, appreciate this has been horrifically challenging and hard for you to go back. But I loved it. I've absolutely loved it. We've always got on well. And I think you're just a super interesting guy with a fairly unique background doing something cool. Thank you for doing this. And I hope that everyone who's listened has enjoyed it. And it sounds like at some point I probably owe you another steak of Goodman's. But for the moment, no, thanks, mate. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Great to chat with you, Lloyd. And thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it very much.